Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Regina Yao, and I'm moderating the 10th YouTube session of the 10th fall edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Yes, it's the 10th anniversary of Read for Pixels. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 35 award-winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. We'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in the session. And you can find out more about the Pixel Project and violence against women and what you can do about violence against women by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. And we have a very special guest for today's live Read for Pixels session and Q&A session. The acclaimed New York Times bestselling fantasy author, Chloe Neill. And welcome, Chloe.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah. So Chloe is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of the Captain Kidd Brightling, Heirs of Chicagoland, and Chicagoland Vampires, Devil's Isle, and Dark Elite novels. She was born and raised in the South, but now makes a home in the Midwest, where she lives with a gamer husband and their bosses / dogs, Baxter and Scout. And Baxter might be making a guest appearance, right?
He might. He is not thrilled that I'm not giving him attention right now, so he might force his way on screen later.
Yep. So Chloe is a voracious reader and obsessive maker of things. The crafting rotation currently involves baking and quilting. Yep.
Such as this fine product here.
That's so gorgeous.
Thank you.
So now, aside from being with us here today, Chloe has also generously donated 2 unique and specially curated gift sets to the stash of author goodies we have up as treats for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. And these are for US donors only. So if you're watching this and if you're in the US, make your way over to the fundraising page. Xiaoqin will share the link, and we'll also share the link again towards the end of the session. So speaking of Chloe's quilting skills, Chloe has offered to give away 1 exclusive bundle of book swag and a quilt that she has specially curated and handmade for the Read for Pixels fundraiser as a gift for a fantasy-loving Read for Pixels fan in the US. And this gorgeous set includes 1 hand-appliqued rainbow quilt by Chloe herself, and that's 44.5 inches by 59.5 inches, so it's a good size. And the books are mass market editions. They are signed and personalized, and they include Biting Cold, Biting Bad, and The Bright and Breaking Scene. That's a really good selection of Chloe's books because they come from 2 different series. Yeah. And the swag includes 4 bookmarks, 2 pens, 2 buttons, and 2 book plates. Now, for this bundle, I'm afraid if you're watching this right now, you're a bit out of luck because we had a really generous donor, Brian Watkins, who has already snapped it up. And he is really sweet. He snapped it up for his wife's birthday. So thank you so much, Brian. And if you still want something from Chloe, we have the second gift set. So it's Chloe Neill's Chicagoland Vampires goodie bundle. And so Chloe has put together this really gorgeous bundle, which includes, now there are 4 books in this bundle. They are mass market editions, and Chloe will sign and personalize it for you. And they include Heart Bitten, Biting Cold, Dark Death, and Devouring Darkness. And the swag includes 4 bookmarks, 2 pens, 2 buttons, and 2 book plates. So you can have lots of fun with your books, and also the bookmarks will help you keep your place in the books whenever you need to stop reading, which is not great. I know, I love books, and when you get interrupted when you're in the middle of a really good book, you really, really want to keep your place. So right now we've raised $5,630, which is $50, which is 56% towards our $10,000 goal so far. So please give generously before the fundraiser ends in October. All funds go towards our work to help end violence against women. Now, if you're watching this session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask Chloe questions live. Just make sure you're logged into YouTube, and so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen. And Xiaoqin, who's today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Chloe to answer. So now we're going to put Chloe on screen. Chloe, what will you be reading for us today? I hear it's quite a treat for your fans.
I am going to be reading Cold Curses, which is the next and final Heirs of Chicagoland book. It's book number 5 in that series, and it will be out on November 14th. So I don't even have a copy yet. I'm literally going to have to read pages off my phone. All right. So we ready?
Yep.
All right. Let's do it. Okay. This is Cold Curses, the 5th Heirs of Chicagoland novel. A claw swept across my face, and I felt the hot breath of hell. The monster had arrived. I shook myself awake and stared into the eyes of my one true enemy, who sat on my chest like a succubus, sleek and black and glaring at me with unabashed loathing. Rawr, she said. What? I asked, trying to make sense of my surroundings. And why? That, Elisa, is a cat, said the wickedly gorgeous shapeshifter currently in human form beside me. Connor Keen's hair was dark and wavy, his body toned and muscles taut. One strong arm was slung over his face, and a smile curved his very kissable mouth. I'm surprised you didn't know that. He might have been my future husband, but I gave him a look nearly as gnarly as the one I'd given the cat. Why, I began again, with admirable patience, is it this cat, and why is it in this house? Nothing to do with me, he said, and gave Eleanor of Aquitaine an arch look. Cat, why are you here? Eleanor of Aquitaine, not Eleanor or Ellie, unless you wanted scratching, belonged to, or owned, Lulu Bell, my roommate and sorcerer. But we weren't in the loft Lulu and I shared. We were in Connor's townhouse. Only Connor lived in the townhouse, but we'd all taken up at least temporary residence there recently. Me, because he was my future husband. Lulu, because she was my bestie and I wanted her safe. Alexi Breckenridge, because he was Connor's best friend and Lulu's boyfriend, friend with benefits, something or other. He'd stayed over at the townhouse during Chicago's most recent supernatural disturbance and hadn't yet left. And now, apparently, we'd added the damned cat. At my apparently rude question, said cat jumped off the bed and slunk into the bathroom. Demon visitation complete, I said, at least until she made it into the closet and began running through our clothes like they were a joint car wash and scratching pad. I glanced at Connor. How are you feeling? He rolled his shoulder, testing. A little sore, but I'll manage. Connor was the son of the North American Central PAC's current apex, Gabriel Keene. Connor had already taken down 3 challengers in his effort to ascend to apex when his dad retired. And they kept coming. Nothing tonight, right? Nothing tonight, he said. You? Depends on the actual demons, I said. I was a vampire born into Chicago's Cadogan House and an associate ombudsman, one of Chicago's human supernatural liaisons. Less than a week ago, we'd sealed away Endaris, a.k.a. Rose, a.k.a. Eglantine, a.k.a. Rosentine, the first demon to enter Chicago in 200 years. While she was no longer a problem, she'd triggered 2 of the wards in the city's Victorian-era magical defense system. We were still trying to get the apparently single-use wards online again and keep the city from being overrun by demons walking through the literal gaps in our defenses. A few demons had made it through already. We were battling them as we found them now, and sprinkling copious amounts of salt, a new addition to the Ombud operating procedure, across Chicago. We hadn't had a night off since we'd brought the house back, and we were basically on call until the problem was resolved. In addition to their penchant for troublemaking and violence, Rosentine had temporarily sent Cadogan House and its inhabitants, including my, Lulu's, and Connor's parents, into another dimension. Did not enjoy, did not wish to repeat. Connor pulled me against him, enveloped me in warmth and magic, and him Just give me 1 minute, he said, and then you can yell at the cat. I snorted. 1 minute, I said, and smoothed a hand over his chest. He made a satisfied sigh and closed his eyes. There were shadows beneath them, faint, dark crescents brought on by too much magic and too much physical exertion. I know you didn't want to stop until you've claimed the throat, I said. But if you need to stop before you can do that, it's fine. We'll find a different way to be. He was quiet for a moment, then smoothed a hand over my long, wavy hair. A different way? Well, we could join the circus. You could be the strong man in those little glittery shorts. I'll do the trapeze. We'll live out of an RV and eat takeout Chinese food. That's quite a plan. Maybe better as a backup situation. In the meantime, continue kicking their asses. That's the plan, he said, and kissed my forehead. The bedroom door, already cracked, was pushed open fully by the sorceress who stepped into the doorway. Her gaze searched the room, but she ignored us, entwined as we were. Your minute is up, I said. Her Highness is in the bathroom, Connor announced. Elisa scared her off. Lulu, I said. A question, a declaration, and a curse in 2 syllables. She was getting lonely, Lulu said, moving into the room. There was a lot of feisty spirit in that petite frame and an apparent skill at old magic, the bloody, potentially evil kind. But the paint-spattered white coveralls, rolled up at the arms and ankles, mitigated the effect. She was an artist first, a sorceress second, and until a week ago, a completely non-practicing one. Demons had changed everything. Lulu was currently working on a mural in Hyde Park, not far from Cadogan House. I narrowed my gaze as she strode to the bathroom, where something made a clunking sound. What did she destroy? I called out. Lulu emerged, the cat sitting queen-like in her arms. Here or there? She asked with a smile. My stare didn't change. What did she pee on at the loft? Let's just say if pee was gold, we'd both be rich. And I hope you didn't like those pink sneakers. You're both very entertaining, Connor said, rolling over to reveal the smooth curves of muscle across his back. But maybe you could entertain somewhere else? With impeccable timing, Alexei stepped into the room, bagel in hand. Silently, he looked at us, then at Lulu and the cat, then chewed. Like Connor, Alexei was tall and strong, with pale skin and dark blonde hair. Alexei didn't talk much. He was a man of quiet loyalty who said much with his piercing hazel eyes, and knew how to back up a friend. And you brought her here, why? I asked. We can't leave her alone at the loft forever, Lulu said. And with the demons out there, who knows how long we'll be camped out here? I'll deal with the demons, I said, and your parents are working on repairing the broken wards. Lulu's parents were powerful sorcerers. I know, I was just saying. Nobody expected it to be immediate. Freaking demons. Freaking demons, Connor and Alexei murmured in unison. Lulu stroked Eleanor of Aquitaine, who purred beneath her paint-stained fingers. While that cat wanted nothing to do with me, she plainly loved Lulu. And it wasn't my style to break up a family. Resigned, I sighed and looked at Connor. Your house, your rules. I don't have a problem with it, he said, voice muffled from the pillow. She actually likes me. And that stung a little. She can stay, I told Lulu. Just keep her out of this room. And any other room in which I might make an appearance. That's most of the house. Lulu's voice was flat. Is it? I asked, as innocently as I could manage. My screen buzzed, and I plucked the thin rectangle of glass from the side table. Work, I said, and even the cat went silent. Work rarely delivered good news an hour before I made it into the office. And that is a good chunk of the first chapter of Cold Curses.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Now, everyone, Chloe will announce when it's going to come out later on. And so let's start the discussion right now. And also a quick heads up, everyone. If you hear any barking, it's not just Baxter, it's also my family dog. So don't mind the barking. Okay, so let's get started. So Chloe, your books feature plenty of complex, compelling, and action-oriented female characters with agency like Merritt in the original Chicagoland Vampires series, Elisa Sullivan, Merritt's daughter in the Heirs of Chicagoland series, and Kit Brightling in the Captain Kit Brightling series. who or what are your inspirations for your female characters?
Oh gosh. You know, I don't think it's anyone in particular. The female characters, I think, are kind of they're culminations of things I've seen, things I've experienced, people I've known, but also just things that I think many of us would like. I think it's a pretty uncommon dream to hope that maybe your world will one day change and things that feel meaningless become meaningful, and you surpass your own expectations, and you find that you have more agency and power than you knew even the day before. And I think that's one theme that runs through all of my lead heroines, as well as just a sense of their lives having changed and they're having to adapt to it, but they're also really being earnest about it and using the resources and the newfound power that they have to try to help others and generally make the world suck a little bit less.
Yeah, we were chatting a little bit about this before we went on air, right? About what you liked about some of the K-drama and C-drama characters, that they were all in professions where it's traditionally male dominated.
Absolutely. I watch a lot of K-dramas, which are, if you're not familiar, dramas, television dramas or series that are based in Korea, and then C-dramas, which is the same thing in China. I particularly love historic or kind of costume fantasy, especially if there's a supernatural element. But some of my favorites are women in historical settings, but in positions that they probably would not have been allowed to hold in those historical settings. They might be physicians, they might be government investigators, they might be historians, and they have the opportunity to really participate in a world that, you know, in reality may not have been open to them, but they're so good at it that they cannot help but probably threaten. I mean, I think there are people who are definitely threatened by their competency, but also people who are impressed by it. And they definitely use those skills in a way that helps others, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. So that kind of leads to our second question, which is, fantasy has so many tropes and stereotypes when it comes to female characters, and some are great and some are just so sexist or misogynist. So how do you break stereotypes and subvert these tropes to create female characters with agency while dealing with the world around her, including sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
You know, it's tricky. And in many, I don't want to say that I write out misogyny, but I do try to surround my heroines with people who inherently believe that they're capable of doing the things that they set out to do. Not everybody believes that. Certainly, there's always going to be doubters. There are people who, even though Merritt and Elisa and Kit Brightling kind of rose through the ranks and their strength is undeniable, there's definitely people who doubt them because they are women. But I also give them friends, lovers, relatives who understand the skills that they have and what they bring to the table. And I try to use that to give them strength and help them to persevere in those situations. But it's definitely, I will say also, it's, it is it's a villain who learns very quickly to underestimate a heroine in one of my novels because she is a woman, or, for whatever classification they might assign to her, because I want them to have agency and I want them to go out and, save the day. That's the fun part.
Yeah, and that kind of mirrors real life, right? Because a lot of times people underestimate women in jobs, in certain, important positions and all, and then, get all those misconceptions just get blown away, because once the woman starts working in a job, she does really well at it a lot of times. So that's really interesting, because also I noticed that Ethan Sullivan is not, when I first started reading your books, I was blown away by him because he did not let sexism or misogyny get in the way of seeing Merritt can actually do this job as one of the guard.
Yeah.
There was no question.
Yeah, I think for him, I mean, 400 years of experience living in the world. And I like to think that he's good on the inside, but also that having been in the world for so long, you learn how many of the stereotypes and the prejudices we have are just that. They're literally stereotypes and prejudices that don't have any grounding in reality. And he has seen enough reality to understand that someone can achieve greatness regardless of their gender or lack of gender, that there is something inherent in someone. There's a drive and a will, and that those things are more important than any category that you might ascribe to somebody. So I give credit to him, but also just I think his longevity has helped him see things that humans with our shorter lifespan, sometimes we miss it.
Yeah. So speaking of merit, your female characters are generally tough and resilient women, and readers may perceive them as quote unquote unlikable and self-lauding them as compelling and gritty characters as they would if they were male. So do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural stereotypes to make your female characters likable or relatable? And do you get any flack for making not making a female character likable enough?
Oh gosh. Fortunately, no, I haven't. I think I write female characters who I would want to be friends with. I don't know if I would be really skilled at writing a truly unlikable character, because I think my characters generally, they may not always make the best decisions, but again, I think they usually want to make the best decisions for people. And it's that competence that I think is one thing that I really enjoy seeing in characters, like we mentioned about K-dramas and C-dramas, but I also like to see it in my own characters. And while I definitely read books that have, anti-heroines, I like a competent, likable heroine who's kind of doing the best she can. Again, that's not to say they're not without flaws. I think Merritt can be, and Elisa as well, can both be kind of naive about things. They're young, they're human. But I definitely try to write characters that people can relate to. And hopefully that's been something that my readers have also have found as well.
Yeah, we kind of ask this question because we've been doing the Read for Pixels program for the last 10 years, and we've noticed that an overwhelming number of female authors do get flack for, when they write female characters that their readers don't like.
Sure.
That find them unlikable because they're not feminine enough, or they're behaving, in ways that, if it was a male character, he wouldn't get any flack for that. So
right.
That was interesting. And male authors don't get that. That's interesting. They don't get flack for writing unlikable characters.
Yeah, there definitely is a double standard, I think, for likability. And that's part of that, I think, is gender expectations and the roles that we expect women to fill, whether in real life or in novels, versus the roles that men are expected to fill, especially in a fantasy setting where so often, it is the male lead who's going on some sort of a hero's quest. And he may be flawed and he may be problematic, but I think many times the women around him are expected to be mother figures or nurse figures or kind of goddess and guiding figures. Women are people. Women are complicated just like anybody else. They have good qualities and bad qualities. So my goal really is to write a person whose decisions are consistent with who they are as a character. And I'm not aware of much criticism that I'm writing characters who don't fit the right mold. So maybe I just have really awesome readers, which is also possibly the case. So thanks everybody.
Yeah, this is what we've noticed over so many years, that different fandoms have different vibes, and your fandom is really nice.
Yeah, they are really, really nice. And again, I think that's, I don't know that I set out necessarily to write these really earnest heroines. And I know I keep coming to that word because it only really occurred to me a couple of years ago that that's what I was doing. But they really do try, and they really do want to make a difference, and they really want to solve problems, even if they're maybe not that great at it. So, maybe it's the readers who encounter those who enjoy those types of characters, maybe they're just also super awesome. So good job readers. You're great.
Yeah, so You know what? Your books definitely pass the Bechdel test with the inclusion of complex relationships between women and other female characters.
Good.
And this is not always the case with fantasy. And basically, um, it's kind of weird because women do talk to each other about a lot of things other than men. I mean, in everyday life, we're talking about, we talk about school, we talk about what we're doing, and not necessarily men. So why do you think so many science fiction and fantasy authors or speculative fiction authors still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact that there are so many, like I said, so many more things that we talk about in real life?
Yeah, I want to be careful in terms of speculating about other writers' motivations, because writing is hard and, people are going to kind of do what they do. I do think part of it might be seeing, especially if they're writing a book with a male heroine, seeing all the other characters as secondary or side characters. I think when you really work through making those secondary or side characters full beings in their own right, with, again, flaws and skills and concerns and joys, it's easy to pass the Bechdel test because it's the stuff of everyday life. It's, oh, my dog's sick today, or, oh, this demon's coming and we need to think about how we're going to solve that problem, or somebody needs to pay the rent. How are we going to do that? All of just the life stuff that happens, whether it's in a fantasy setting or a real world setting, having characters that experience all those things, I think, helps people write really well-rounded characters who aren't just discussing relationships. And I love writing secondary characters. I love writing secondary characters as much as writing main characters. And so I take a lot of joy in trying to make them as well-rounded as I can, even when they don't get all of the screen time. So I think that is definitely one way to avoid writing characters who only want to discuss relationships, is actually remember that they are people and that they will have the same kinds of worlds of concerns that real people would, not just the status of the relationship.
Yeah, and that's also a great way of, writing supporting characters that are also really well drawn and also very believable. It's also a great way for world building, because we don't exist in a vacuum, right? Like,
exactly.
We exist in society.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody, people don't, even the most introverted people, of which I am one, there are still other people in our world, and those people are all living their own lives as well. So I think, it's a challenge, definitely, to try to get into the headspace of 40 characters at a time. But I think it adds a richness to the novel, just like understanding a city's architecture or weather or history does.
Yeah. So I mentioned Ethan just now. So let's talk about the men in your books. And they range from characters like Ethan, who treat their female counterparts and partners with respect and equals, to those who exhibit some sexism and misogyny. As you said just now, you can't really keep that out of your books all the time. So do you think, so here's the question, do you think reframing how stories describe men away from the hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways that science fiction and fantasy authors can break away from unhealthy tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
Oh, absolutely. And frankly, the dehumanization of men as well. Again, this is, toxic masculinity. There's something in it that seems to me, at least, that it strives to be very one-dimensional. If you are a man, you must fit these 4 characteristics. But again, people are complex. They live in complex worlds. People have strengths and vulnerabilities, and that's such a great quality that you mentioned. It was really important to me, especially in Heirs of Chicagoland, which is about a man and a woman who have very powerful parents and kind of grow up in the shadow of those powerful parents, to have their own strengths and weaknesses, but also to experience vulnerability, because they are both strong. Elisa and Connor, her love interest, they're strong people and they are expected to be leaders. And Connor is a shifter, and there is there is kind of an edge of toxic masculinity there, and a sense that he needs to be strong and he needs to be ready to fight. And he has, I think, some reasonable discomfort with that, and wonders many times, is fighting someone, is that what makes somebody a good leader? If I can beat someone up, does that mean that I'm a good leader, or does that just mean that I beat them once in some sort of a physical challenge? So again, I think if we focus on really thinking about people as complex creatures in a complex world, who have their own attributes, then I think we end up with much more well-rounded and more interesting characters. Because a guy who's strong but also has vulnerabilities, just to me as a reader, is much more interesting than a guy who is, or a female who is, one-dimensional.
Yeah. Well, we have a question from the audience that relates to this. I'm just going to put it on the screen. So, hi, Misty306. Misty is one of our regular viewers, and Misty is also a librarian. So, Misty has a question. Why do you believe urban fantasy and paranormal remains popular literary genres for women, even though there are some male characters who display toxic masculine traits?
Gosh, that's a great question. I guess, the one thing I would hesitate to say is that I don't want to single out urban fantasy and paranormal romance as being the genre with male characters who display toxic masculine traits, because I think that's found in a lot of genres. So I don't want to single that out, particularly as being the bad genre. That said, I think one of the most interesting things about urban fantasy and paranormal romance is that they tend to have female leads. So while, there may be characters, male or female, who are not as thoroughly developed, or who may have those kinds of traits, for the most part, you're also going to have a female heroine, maybe who's battling back against those expectations, who is maybe her needs are centered in the novel, which is, not something that's seen super often in a lot of other genres. So and obviously, I think people really, and I personally as a reader, like reading the supernatural, because I don't always want to think about, am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? I want to think about, there's going to be a demon attack, because it helps take my mind off the normal day-to-day stuff. So I think it's those elements of having, female heroines whose concerns are centered, but also the supernatural element. And while it's not, it's certainly not a perfect genre, but there are some authors out there who make amazing contributions to the literature, and who are really working to present full and really well-developed characters.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna add, to what you said. I actually started reading urban fantasy because traditional epic fantasy just wasn't doing it for me, because it was so male-driven. And so when I stumbled across authors like Faith Hunter and Patricia Briggs, I'm like, this is great. I get to read fantasy stories with women in the lead.
Yeah. We're telling women's stories, which is, again, that's been historically, there hasn't been that much opportunity. I think things are changing more recently, especially in speculative fiction, and a lot of the new works that are coming out by Tor. There is some amazing speculative fiction out there that's female led, but for a long time there just wasn't a lot. And urban fantasy and paranormal romance was really, in addition to just romance generally, but those were among science fiction fantasy. That was one of the first genres to really focus on stories about women experiencing these supernatural phenomenon.
Yeah. So I'm gonna hide this and let's put this up. So moving along from Misty's question, I have to ask, do you think that eventually the violent alpha male type character will phase out of fantasy as cultures worldwide start dealing with toxic masculinity? Or do you think that it's one of these stereotypes that would stick around for much longer than we expect?
Gosh, what an interesting question. I honestly don't know. I think part of that is going to be a market issue. I think readers determine what sells, and so they determine in large part what gets published. So it depends honestly on what people want to read. But also, you know, I don't think violence is ever going to be out of any novels, whether it's paranormal and urban fantasy or otherwise, because humans are, for better or worse, you know, violence is part of our existence on Earth, and battling the people who we see as other, however we define that phrase, is, you know, it has been fodder for books since the beginning of writing, and it will probably be fodder for books through the end of time. But again, I think, you know, part of the solution of writing characters who fall under the toxic masculinity header is really to write fully realized and fully developed characters, which is difficult. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, to challenge those expectations for yourself as a reader. You know, there are people, whether it's editors or other readers or authors, who may not yet be aware of those kind of the damage that those types of stereotypes can do, just like any other types of stereotypes. So while I think, you know, I don't think we're ever going to see an end of violence in books, it would be great to think about the possibility that you know, really fully developed, complex characters who truly mirror our very complex society are kind of the next wave. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Oh, Misty had a response to your answer. That's an intriguing answer. Yes, many protagonists in both genres are women, while epic fantasy is the opposite. Thank you for answering my question.
You're very welcome.
So let's talk about writing, because storytelling is one of the most powerful ways of helping with social change. And we found that that's why we started the Read for Pixels program, because we realized that stories and storytellers are so important and integral to how ideas are presented and what ideas are circulating in society. So let's talk about genre and writing. Now, the line between consent and coercion isn't always very clear in fantasy books, whether it's epic fantasy, urban fantasy, or paranormal romance. Certainly, in some subgenres of fantasy, such as grimdark fantasy, violence against women is still used as a catalyst for a male character's development, or as a shorthand for showing how brutal the world is. Now, do you think this is an issue that writers in the fantasy genres have started tackling successfully in recent years?
Man, that's a really tough question. Just to be frank, there are definitely writers whose books I don't read any longer, because I think the violence that's taken against women in those books is just more than I'm personally able to handle. I think, you know, it may or may not bother other people, but it's not the kind of thing I want to read about. I think one thing we definitely have to tackle is the idea that the only way to motivate a character, if she's a woman, is to have some sort of violence done to her in the past, or maybe if it's a man, that violence was done to his woman. I mean, that's kind of I love the John Wick stories, but that's part of the John Wick trope, is that, you know, had his wife not been killed, the sequence of events that is John Wick would not have happened. Now, do I think it's realistic in that setting? Absolutely. But there are lots of ways to motivate a character that don't involve violence against women. You know, I don't want to discourage people from reading the kinds of things they like. As the DFTBA folks would say, I don't want to yuck anybody's yum. You know, read the things that you enjoy reading, but I would like to see more creativity in terms, especially of motivation for characters, because we're writing fiction. We're not writing historical fiction. I mean, we're not writing history. We're not telling history about violence that has obviously been done to women and men across the centuries. We have the opportunity, I think, to create different and more complex backgrounds that don't use violence against women as a plot device, which, again, I don't want to say it should never be used, or that it doesn't serve purposes, or that it's not a fact of life. It obviously is. But I would like for us as writers to think about the other kinds of choices that we could make, especially when it comes to motivating our characters.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say choices, because, you know, we had a panel session yesterday with people like PC Cast and Alison Goodman and Sebastian de Castell, and they were talking about how tropes are tropes, but it's how you, but in order to deploy those tropes effectively and not fall into all these traps where you are fridging the female character, a female character for the sake of a male character's development, you really have to think things through. You can't just use it and ta-da, it's happened, we're just going to move on from it. It's not that. That's where we get all the stuff where, you know, it becomes, it's not great.
Yeah, especially when it becomes one-dimensional. I love the idea of deploying a trope effectively. That's such an interesting way of phrasing that, because that is what you're doing. A trope is a tool. I write in a genre. Obviously, I write tropes every day. That's what genre is. It's a kind of a collection of tropes that we pick and choose from. But again, just like writing characters, I think those authors are spot on. We can do... you know, it's easy to pick a trope and not look beyond it, not think about what's beneath it, and not think about why it exists. And I think it's more interesting to take that trope and maybe turn it on its head. Also to think about, you know, whether it's violence against men or women, violence against a character. What does that do to the character? What does that do to the society that the character's in? You know, it might be a motivating factor for a male character, but it's going to have an impact, obviously, on the victim. It's going to have an impact on her family and on her community. And if we can think about those things, we can end up with a more interesting dialogue, I think, about violence, and not just using it one-dimensionally to serve our kind of purpose as writers.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? So many writers, including you, say when you use when there's an incidence of violence against women, you need to show the consequences and the ramifications on the victim and also the people around her. And here's an interesting thing that happened with Steven Erikson. So he writes the Malazan books, and they are extremely popular. And there's a female character in his books that nobody likes. So during his session with us, his fans were asking him about her. And he pointed this out. He said, would you be likable if you had survived severe sexual assault and you were trying to deal with it and you're trying to work through the trauma and you're trying to, you know, just function in everyday life? And what's interesting is after he said that in the different Malazan groups, Facebook groups that we are also part of, people have started talking about this. So the fact that Stephen had written about the consequences of that violence on that character, it did not strike readers, did not make the connection. Right. But once the author started talking about it, they started going, oh, recovering from trauma isn't easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, in your opinion, how can authors strike a balance in their storytelling between raising awareness about violence against women and telling an engaging story without being pedantic or preachy?
Oh, gosh, that is the hardest question of all. And that's hard. I mean, it's hard about everything, you know, whatever issue it is, whether it's acceptance or discrimination or transphobia or violence against women, you know, I want to write books that present a diverse and inclusive world. And it's definitely hard to do that without wondering if someone is going to say, oh, this is, you know, for example, diverse for the sake of diversity. But again, the world is in fact diverse. The world is complex and people are complex. And I know I kind of keep coming back to that, but I think if we as writers try to think about our characters as three-dimensional, four-dimensional creatures who have a past, a present, and a future, and the decisions that we make as writers in terms of plot are going to affect them, and they're going to trickle down and have consequences. I think if we can start thinking about writing that way, we can get away from either feeling like we're relying too simplistically on tropes or being pedantic, because it's, you know, pedantry, I think in this instance is saying, for example, violence against women is bad. Like if we put that in a book, somebody's going to say, what weird banner is this that's in your novel? But our job as writers is to maybe impress upon people what, as you noted, the consequences of violence are, how they affect, how they ripple out in time and in space. And if we can write in a way that tells that story, we don't have to be pedantic because the story will explain those issues to people. I mean, that's the resource and the tool that we have is the storytelling.
Okay. Oh, speaking of storytelling and writing, we have a question from the audience. So Miss Behave 8 says, how do you balance work and writing? And also thank you for creating a world that I can keep going back to reading.
Oh, thank you so much. And I like your name. That's very cute. So I have a day job and I write as well. My husband is, as Regina noted in the beginning, is a gamer and he games, and I make things in my free time, whether that's quilting or writing or making bracelets for some reason is the thing that I'm into right now. So, it's definitely a challenge, but we don't have children, and I'm fortunate that my day job, gives me resources to get help where we need it. So I don't know that there is a secret. I think I tried to do too much, to just be real honest. Over the vast majority of my career, I tried to write too many books in a short period of time, and I was exhausted and a little burned out. And I think I knew it was too much, but I wasn't sure how to pull back. And I think what I'm trying to do now is really enjoy the writing differently. And I think enjoyment is a pretty good test. I mean, writing is hard, and there definitely are days when I don't want to do it. There are days when it's a challenge. But if you're enjoying it, then that's probably what the balance is. If you are frustrated by it, but in a good way because it's a challenge and you're not yet sure how to meet it, or there's a writing block because there's a problem you're not sure how to get over, I think that's good. So I think self-assessment and really understanding what your needs are. And again, it took me 10 years plus to figure that out. So I don't think it's something that's automatic. But if you keep kind of visiting with yourself in terms of whether you're meeting that balance, I think that's a great way to start.
Okay. Thank you for your question, Miss Behave 8. So, let's talk about wider pop culture and geek cultures. Now, geek culture in general, including fantasy, has had its share of critics saying that it's still too male-dominated, despite a rising number of prominent, well-respected, and well-known female authors such as yourself. Plus, there is still plenty of hostile, misogynist, and sexist behavior by male geeks towards female geeks. What do you think needs to be done to make geek culture as a whole, whether it's comics or gaming or books or cons, more welcoming for women and girls?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. You're asking all the hard questions. One, I think having conference policies about inclusion, having clear conference policies about harassment and the consequences of harassment, having folks who are in vulnerable positions, that folks they can turn to, structures and reporting resources are fantastic, because people are going to people regardless of their gender. Somebody may be a jerk to somebody else for a reason that is discriminatory, and if there is a reporting structure, if there's a safe person or a safe place that they know they can report to, I think that helps a lot. One, because the people engaging in that behavior hopefully are going to think twice before they do it. Second, though, knowing that the conference organizers have your back if something like that happens, and you have ways to find safety, that's super, super important. But I think, another big issue is just normalizing the presence of women at conferences. Women are at conferences. Women are geeks. Women have been geeks the entire time, you guys. I am Gen X, and I have been on computers since my dad brought home a TRS-80 from Radio Shack. So, you know, geek culture goes back a very, very long way, even for the ladies. And I think, you know, just normalizing the fact that we've been there the whole time, coming to understand that we're not a threat. Nobody's trying to take anything away from anybody, that we love, you know, we love geek stuff as much as anybody else. You know, I've got the Star Trek: The Next Generation. I had the technical manual for the Enterprise. We're geeks. We're out there. We're doing it. So, you know, help make sure that you've got panels at conferences who are diverse. Make sure that you are inviting women to speak about these issues, and make sure that you've got, you know, in case things go wrong, make sure you've got reporting mechanisms so that folks can find a safe place to be and kind of end the trouble before it starts.
Yeah, and you know, if a little bit of tidbit here, I think Star Trek would not have come into creation if it wasn't for Lucille Ball, right? She funded.
I just read that. Yeah, absolutely. That it was her and Desi Arnaz's production company, and her particularly, who wanted to finance Star Trek, which is fascinating. I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah, and I read somewhere that Dolly Parton funded Buffy the Vampire Slayer so it could take off, I think. So
you know, yeah, that sounds familiar. It's been a while since I read that, but we've been there the whole time. The whole time.
Yeah, and Mary Shelley, she's the mother of science fiction.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's, you know, it's the same thing in the mystery and crime genre. Like we see, there's a lot of, you know, we had a panel about that earlier as well, and we're talking about there's so much toxic masculinity in that, and for periods of time, a lot of the subgenres were, you know, like noir and all were all heavily male dominated, but the best-selling mystery author in the world, and also apparently the best-selling author in history, is Agatha Christie.
Yep. I'm reading the Miss Marple books for the first time now, and they are fantastic. Now they have their own problems. I'm not gonna say they're not problematic. There are many elements of them that are that reflect the attitudes of a particular moment in time, but they're also just really good mystery novels. And they are, honestly, reading them has been a great way to teach me how to write mysteries, even though I've been basically writing mysteries since the first urban fantasy novel I wrote. But it's been an education, and they're fantastic.
Yeah. And, everyone's talking about, wow. Oh, here we go. So Xiaoqun, today's producer, says, that's right. Women have been carrying the flag for a long time.
Yeah, Xiaoqun knows it. She knows.
Yeah. So we have come to the final question, a final couple of questions. So I'm just going to ask that right now. Okay. So you have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. I mean, to be honest, when your agent came back to us and said, Chloe said yes, we were like, yay, this is great. So we have to ask, and this is a Captain Obvious question, why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Oh gosh, I don't know how to sum that up, because it shouldn't be a thing, because it's not a thing that we should have to talk about as human beings we put rovers on Mars. We have been to the moon. We have been to the depths of the ocean. We have explored our universe, and there's no reason to continue to have violence against women. That should no longer be, you know, discrimination against women, whether it is, you know, the violence, actual physical violence, or the violence of low expectations. We have done so much as humans, but we cannot escape that trap. And we are better than that, and we should be better than that. And I hope that education and that what you guys are doing at the Pixel Project can really help as the new generation learns and grows, to not use violence as a tool for political or economic or emotional oppression.
Yeah, we hope to, you know, the kids are all right if you get to them early enough. Yeah. And they're listening out there.
Yeah.
So finally, what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
Oh gosh, normalize, you know, women and men, and people who are non-binary having complex discussions, learning to accept each other for who they are, learning strategies to deal with anger or poverty, using the resources they have to help other people, telling stories that normalize those kind of behaviors and not violence against women. You know, I don't know if any story I've written has made someone think, maybe I as a woman can be a different kind of person today. Maybe I as a man can be a different kind of person. I hope that they have. I hope someone reads something that I've written and believes that they can be different or better. And I think that's something we can all do as writers, is to, you know, normalize a world where violence is not necessary as a tool to control other people.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put myself back on screen. Yay, everyone! If you joined us in the middle of this, this is what I look like. That disembodied voice off the screen, because we know that, you know, you come here to see Chloe and not me. So thank you, Chloe, for that really excellent discussion, and thank you everyone for tuning in. And just to quickly recap, Chloe has also generously donated a couple of awesome goodie bundles to the stash of author goodies that we have up as perks for donors on the Read for Pixels fundraising page. Now, one of the bundles has gone. That's Chloe's Fantastic Books and Winter Quilt bundle. That has gone. Thank you so much to Brian, who donated to get it. But we have one more left. Now, I'm going to share a slide here to tell everyone where to go get it. But we have one more bundle from Chloe. It's Chloe's Chicagoland Vampires goodie bundle. And we've talked a lot about the Chicagoland Vampires during this discussion. So if you haven't read Chloe's series yet, this is your chance to do that while donating to the cause. The bundle includes 4 books. These are mass market editions. They'll be signed and personalized by Chloe for you or anyone you want to give the bundle to. You have 1 copy of Hard Bitten, 1 copy of Biting Cold, 1 copy of Dark Death, and 1 copy of Devouring Darkness. And there's swag as well. You have 4 bookmarks, 2 pens, 2 buttons, and 2 book plates. Now, this bundle is for US donors only. So if you're in the US and you're thinking of donating to us, go check out the bundle. And there's only 1 of this bundle. So if you want to have it, check it out fast. Make your donation fast before someone else gets it. And there are plenty more author goodies available from folks such as Alison Goodman, Anne Bishop, Brandon Sanderson, C.S.E. Cooney, Dana Cameron, Mary Robinette Caldwell, Matt Gardiner, Sebastian D. Castell, Subterranean Press, and more. And we've just raised $5,630. That's 56% of the way towards our $10,000 goal so far. So please do give generously. Now, I have this up on screen, so you can donate to get these goodies from Rally Up at https://tinyurl.com/R4P Rally Up 2023. Now, these are case sensitive. So in case you're taking this down, make sure you type it out exactly as it is. Xiaoqin is also sharing the link in the chat box, so you can click to go straight from there, straight to the fundraising page from YouTube. And you can find out more about the Read for Pixels program at bit.ly/readforpixels. This is also case sensitive. Now, we were telling Chloe about this. We actually have a charity anthology that's out. It's been out for almost 2 years. It's called Giving the Devil His Due, which is a cross between Twilight Zone and Promising Young Woman. And it has been nominated for a Shirley Jackson Award and for an Audie Award as well. And it's available now from Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and all major booksellers worldwide. It's only available until the 31st of October 2023. So if you really want to have a copy, go get a copy now before it's taken off the shelves. And for more information about the anthology, go to bit.ly/Giving the Devil His Due. Again, this is case sensitive. Now, if you prefer audiobooks, you can get it from Audible, Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Kobo, Chirp, and other major audiobook retailers worldwide. You want to learn more about the award-winning audiobook narrators who have contributed their time and talent to this audiobook, go to tinyurl.com/gtdhd audiobook R4P. I'm going to take this off screen. Now, Chloe, do you have any announcements you want to make? When is Cold Curses coming out?
So Cold Curses, which I mentioned is the 5th and final Heirs of Chicagoland novel. It is the last vampire novel. Will be out on November 14th, 2023. Obviously, it's available for pre-order at all of your various retailers. The Audible link, I think, is not up yet. That usually comes out a couple of weeks before the release. If you want to pre-order the book and have me sign and or personalize a copy and get a copy of this amazing sticker sheet, which I'm also going to throw in the Rally Up goodie bag. You can pre-order at The Bookworm, which is the bookstore in Omaha, and you can visit my website, chloeneill.com, for information about how to pre-order, and the link will be there as well. Pre-orders, as everybody knows, are a very big deal for authors. They're a very big deal for publishers, so we greatly appreciate all pre-orders.
I see pre-orders as like a vote of confidence.
Oh, totally. Publishers also see them as a vote of confidence. Absolutely.
Yeah. So everyone, before we wrap up, just remember, if you need help, if you're a victim, if you need help, or if you are someone who just wants to learn more about violence against women, or if you would like to volunteer with us, because we are 100% volunteer-run organization, please visit www.thepixelproject.net. We have tons of primers about different types of violence against women. And you can also contact us via our website if you need help. And we'll connect you with your local, anyone in your area who's helping with that. So thank you so much for being with us today, Chloe. And everyone, have a really good day or good night wherever you are in the world. It's the weekend, so enjoy.
Thanks, everybody.